All right, buckle up, everybody, because this is a deep dive all about fuel. And not just any fuel. We're talking diesel and gasoline mixtures in Colombia. We found this report from February 2025 by the Universidad Nacional de Colombia. And they did this massive experiment. The results are pretty wild.
Yeah, it's a really interesting report. What's cool is that they actually did some real-world testing at the university's Crudos y Derivados lab. This lab is like a hub for everything fuel-related. They work with companies, the government, even students, all learning about fuel.
So it's not just some ivory tower research then. They were really getting their hands dirty.
Exactly. And they didn't hold back on the scale either.
Yeah.
We're talking a whopping 216 diesel samples and 72 gasoline samples.
Oh, that's a lot of fuel.
Yeah, and get this. They tested them all at 3 different Terpel plants, Baranoa, Medellin, and Mulalo.
They really went all out.
They did. And the goal was to see how different ingredients affect the fuel. Things like biodiesel additives, even color dye.
Color dye, like the stuff that makes the fuel look green or red?
Yeah, that's the one.
I'm intrigued.
So they were looking at how these ingredients affected something called marker readings.
Marker readings. I think I've heard that term before, but maybe you could break it down for us.
Sure. So basically, marker readings are like fingerprints for fuel. Each type of fuel has its own unique marker reading. It helps identify it.
Like a fuel ID card.
Yeah, exactly. And these readings are really important for a couple of reasons. First, they help prevent something called fuel adulteration. That's when someone tries to sneak in cheaper ingredients to cut costs.
So like watering down the fuel?
Kind of, but more sophisticated.
Okay, I get it.
And secondly, marker readings help with tax evasion. Make sure everyone's paying their fair share.
Ah, so it's a quality control thing.
Right. It's all about making sure the fuel is what it's supposed to be.
Makes sense. So what did they find out about these marker readings?
Well, let's start with diesel. The average readings range from about 79.33 to 111.67.
Okay, that's a pretty wide range.
It is. But here's the crazy part. Some of the readings were way lower than expected.
I have a feeling that color dye might have something to do with it.
You're right on the money. They found that the amount of color dye had a big impact on the marker readings. The more dye they added, the lower the readings were.
Really? But why would color dye affect the readings like that?
That's a great question. And to be honest, the report doesn't really delve into the why. It just focuses on the what.
So it's a bit of a mystery.
For now, yeah. But we do know that the type of diesel blend also played a role. They tested different blends like BO2 and B10.
Just to clarify for our listeners, what do those numbers mean?
Good point. Those numbers refer to the percentage of biodiesel blended with regular diesel. So BO2 is 2% biodiesel. B10 is 10%, and so on.
Okay, gotcha.
And what they found was that different blends had different effects on the marker readings.
So it's not just the dye, it's also the mix of the fuel itself.
Exactly. It's a complex interplay of factors.
Fuel science is complicated.
You can say that again.
All right, so we've got color dye and the type of blend affecting diesel readings. What about gasoline? Did they find anything similar there?
Absolutely. Color dye also had a big impact on gasoline readings. More dye meant lower readings.
So that seems to be a consistent trend.
It does. And just like with diesel, the type of gasoline blend mattered too. They tested different blends like GEX and GEX plus coal.
I'm guessing those are different types of gasoline.
Right. GEX is a standard blend, while GEX plus coal has some additional components that are specific to the Colombian market.
Interesting.
And again, those differences in composition led to variations in the marker readings.
So we're seeing a pattern here. The more dye, the lower the readings. And the specific fuel blend also makes a difference.
Precisely. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Anything else surprising pop up in the gasoline tests?
Actually, yeah. They found that adding a certain additive to the gasoline also lowered the marker readings, although not as much as the color dye.
So it's like even a little tweak to the mix can throw things off.
That's right. It's a very delicate balance.
Okay, so we've got color dye fuel blends. It's all starting to make sense. But wait. You mentioned earlier that they tested these samples at 3 different plants. Did that factor into the results at all?
You know what? It did. The location of the testing also played a role. Samples from the La Maria plant consistently had higher readings than those from Baranoa.
Oh, hold on. So where they tested the fuel also matters.
It seems so. And this was true for both diesel and gasoline.
That's wild. But why would the location make a difference?
That's the million-dollar question. It could be that the base fuel composition is different at each plant. Or maybe local regulations play a role. The report doesn't really provide an explanation.
So another fuel mystery for us to ponder.
Exactly.
So we got color dye, fuel blends, and even the location all affecting these marker readings. My head is spinning.
Mine too.
What does all this mean for the accuracy of fuel quality checks? And how about taxation? If something as simple as color dye can mess with the readings, it makes you wonder about the integrity of the whole system.
You're hitting on a really important point, and that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
All right, I'm on the edge of my seat. Stay tuned, everyone, because this fuel investigation is just getting started.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're picking up right where we left off with those marker readings.
Yeah, you really had me wondering, what does all this mean for regular folks like me? Just trying to fill up the tank.
It's a good question. And to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little concerning. If those marker readings are supposed to guarantee fuel quality and prevent tax evasion, but then something as basic as color dye can mess with them, it kind of makes you question the whole system.
Hold on a sec. Isn't it possible that those dye discrepancies are just like anomalies, you know? Like maybe it's not that widespread.
That's a valid point.
Right.
But the thing is, this study suggests that the way we check fuel quality, it might be vulnerable. If those readings can be manipulated so easily, it could open the door for some shady practices.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Give me an example. What kind of shady practices are we talking about?
So imagine someone selling low-quality fuel, but they're covering it up by adding more dye. They could undercut legitimate businesses, cheat consumers.
Oh, wow. That's not good.
No, it's not. It could create unfair competition and even impact government tax revenue.
I see. So it's not just about the fuel itself, it's about the whole system, the economics, everything.
Exactly. It's bigger than just what's in the tank.
So what can we do about it?
Well, I think we need better testing methods, something more sophisticated than just relying on marker readings.
You're saying we need to up our game.
I think so.
Okay, makes sense.
We need to be proactive, protect consumers, protect the whole fuel market.
I agree. So we've talked about the economic side of things. What about the environmental impact? Does the dye in fuel affect emissions or anything like that?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, this particular study didn't look into those environmental aspects.
So we're still in the dark there.
For now, yeah. But it's definitely something worth investigating.
I think so too. It's like a whole other layer to this issue. Okay, so we need more research. What's the next step then? Where do we go from here?
Well, for starters, I think raising awareness is crucial. This Colombian study, it's really brought some important information to light.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do here on the Deep Dive. Shine a light on this research, get people talking.
Right. The more we talk about it, the more likely it is that someone will take action.
Hopefully.
Maybe this will even lead to the development of, new and improved testing methods.
Fingers crossed. Knowledge is power, as they say.
It really is. And in this case, knowledge about fuel could lead to a more transparent and sustainable energy future.
That's what I like to hear. This whole deep dive has really got me thinking. It's amazing how something as simple as color dye can have such big consequences.
It's a perfect example of how science is full of surprises.
Yeah. Before we move on, though, I have one more question. You mentioned that they tested samples at 3 different plants, Baranoa, La Maria, and one other.
Oh, yeah. The third plant was in Medellin.
Right, Medellin. So did they find anything interesting at the Medellin plant? You haven't really talked about that yet?
That's a sharp observation. Actually, the report only focuses on the results from Baranoa and La Maria. There's no mention of any findings from the Medellin plant.
Really? So we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
It seems that way.
Why would they leave that out?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe there were some logistical issues. Or maybe the testing at that plant wasn't consistent with the other 2. It's possible they just didn't have the resources to include it in the report.
That's frustrating. It makes you wonder if the Medellin results would have shown the same trends, or if they would have been totally different.
It's a mystery.
Well, I guess that's how science works sometimes. There are always more questions to ask.
Yeah, that's true.
So for now, we'll have to focus on what we do know. And even that is pretty mind-blowing.
I agree.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
It's amazing how much we rely on fuel without really understanding it.
Well said. All right, folks. That's it for part 2 of our fuel marker investigation. But don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the final part, where we'll wrap up everything we've learned and explore what it all means for the future of fuel.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the final part of our fuel deep dive. It's been a wild ride. I'm still processing all this info about color dye and marker reading.
And who knew it was so complicated?
Right. And you left us with a real cliffhanger there.
Yeah.
About all those other hidden factors that could be messing with fuel quality.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We've talked a lot about marker readings. But they're really just one piece of the puzzle. There are so many other things that can affect the quality of fuel.
Like what?
Well, for starters, there's where the crude oil comes from. Different sources have different properties.
Yeah.
Then there's the refining process, how the fuel's actually made. That can have a huge impact on the final product.
Okay, so it's not just about what we see at the pump.
Nope. It's a whole chain of events, and every step can affect the fuel's quality.
So how are we supposed to know what we're getting? It's tough. But there's some things we can do.
Tell me more.
First of all, be informed. Do your research. Learn about fuel quality. Understand what can impact it.
Okay, knowledge is power.
Exactly. Then when you're choosing a gas station, be picky.
Picky how?
Look for places that are well-maintained, clean facilities, clear information about their fuel.
So not all gas stations are created equal.
That's right. You want to find one that you trust.
Gotcha. What about those fuel additives they advertise? Do those actually do anything?
Some of them can, like the ones that clean fuel injectors or improve combustion. But there's also a lot of hype out there, so be careful. Do your research.
Okay.
And one more thing. Pay attention to your car.
What do you mean?
If you noticed any changes in fuel economy or engine performance, or if your emissions seem off, it could be a sign of fuel quality issues. So don't ignore those warning signs.
Okay, good to know.
It's all about being proactive, taking control of the situation.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. I'm definitely going to be more mindful about the fuel I use.
Me too.
It's amazing how much we take fuel for granted.
It's essential to our lives, but we rarely stop to think about it.
Well said. A huge thank you to the Universidad Nacional de Colombia for their incredible research. They've given us a lot to think about.
Absolutely. And thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to look at fuel in a different way.
That's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive, exploring the complex world around us, one deep dive at a time. Until next time, stay curious and keep those engines running.
And those tanks full of high-quality fuel.